Hello everyone. I wanted to come on and give you another report and to clear up a couple of things from the last report that I gave you as well about the situation here in Australia. There has been some question over some of the things that I showed you, some of the things down here. When I said this is fracking wells down here, some people have questioned whether they are fracking wells. Whatever folks, the issue is that there are 43,000 frack wells in Australia. Each one uses between 1.5 to 16 million gallons of water. That's the issue that we're facing here. Another thing that I spoke about on the last show was the Deagle report of population reduction. When I showed you the report of 2025 and I showed you the population reduction, I said it shows a population reduction of 15 million people for Australia. I actually read that wrong. I was very tired. Sorry about that. I do make mistakes sometimes, folks. And it's a reduction to 15 million, which would be a reduction of around about 8 million people on the Deagle website. The Deagle website isn't an official website. That's something that you've got to take into consideration. It's just a site that tracks military spending. It comes up with the figures the way it comes up with the figures. Some people have questioned it, saying, well, because it's not an official website, we need to take it with a grain of salt. I would suggest we need to take everything with a grain of salt, folks, because, I mean, the figures from official websites certainly can't be trusted on anything because, I mean, look at the lies that they've told us so far. Anyway, you know, the way we've gone in the world, folks, they certainly haven't been truthful about anything. But last reports, I mean, I showed you the floodplain harvesting that's going on, the water farming that's going on. This is copy farms. A lot of this water farming that you're seeing here is used for cotton farming and things like that. The fact that you would even grow cotton in Australia is completely ridiculous. I mean, this is a country where water is very scarce and cotton takes an enormous amount of water to grow. So why would anyone even be doing cotton farming in Australia? It's an interesting question. I also showed you the private dams that are being built, and you can go and look at the last report that I did. You'll find a link below to that report. You'll find links to everything I show you on the report today below, so you can go and check it all out for yourself. I showed you all about this stuff, and we've been making a difference, folks, because the official sources, official news sources, have been saying that tens of thousands of Aussies are engaging in Agenda 21 conspiracy on social media. They're saying tens of thousands of Aussies are lapping up a ridiculous conspiracy theory that climate change is a United Nations-led hoax. Interesting thing. Ridiculous conspiracy theory, they're saying. Pushing the theory known as Agenda 21, and down here they tell you what Agenda 21 is, how it's actually a document that was put forth. It's an agenda that was put forth, Sustainable Development Goals, by more than 178 countries in 1992. So in one point they tell you it's a theory, and then on the other side they tell you that they actually put it out. So how is it a theory? Interesting. But something you've got to pay attention to here when looking at all of this is that what it focuses on here is directed energy weapons. This is one of the claims that are being made. So this is what the media uses to discredit the reports that we're putting out, folks. You know, directed energy weapons are real, certainly. And there's quite certainly evidence that they may well have been used in the California fires, but there's no evidence that I can find to suggest that directed energy weapons have been used here. So people shouldn't really be pushing that. You know, we need to be sticking to what we can prove, folks. Excuse me, my moustache is a bit itchy. We need to be sticking to what we can prove, folks, and not throwing in things like directed energy weapons when we don't know if that's what they're using. We need to look at what we do know they're using and what we can prove with these fires. Because as you can see, this is what the mainstream will use to discredit the reports that we're putting out. But the reports that I put out last week, or the last report that I did, referring to the fact that what's being sprayed in the skies is essentially sparkler dust, is very revealing, folks. And when you look at what we're seeing here in Australia, I mean, the fires are quite literally out of control. It hasn't stopped. We've had a little bit of rain here in the last few days where I live. About 3 days it's been raining over Christmas, a little bit of reprieve for people. There's been all sorts of people celebrating the coming back of the rain and saying, yes, the water crisis will soon be over. But I'd like to point out to them that none of the creeks here have started flowing. it hasn't done a thing to the river systems, hasn't done a thing to the creek systems. The aquifers are still dry. This is just a little bit of water that's fallen from the sky, but it hasn't done anything to relieve the situation in any meaningful way at all. And the report that I mentioned last week as well, how we are going to be running out of water. There's a report that came out that was on the news in Sydney report. Have a look at this, what she says here. I did mention it to you on the last report, but I'll just play you a little bit of it here as well. This is the situation that we're facing in Australia, folks.
A stark warning tonight that Sydney could be without drinking water within 2.5 years unless we get significant rain or even tighter water restrictions. And now there's a more pressing concern, protecting what's in the dam from being contaminated by ash and debris from bushfires.
At Warragamba Dam today, haze the only hint of a threat nearby, a huge fire front producing ash and debris that poses a risk to our drinking water. Water authorities are now considering booms and curtains to intercept contaminants.
We want to just make sure...
So that's the thing, it isn't just the loss of water, it's the water being contaminated by the ash from the bushfires as well. And it isn't just in Australia, folks, it's happening everywhere. It's also happening in Africa. If you haven't looked at Africa, this is Victoria Falls at the moment. If anyone's ever been to Victoria Falls, check it out. That's what they're doing in Africa. That's what's happened to Victoria Falls. It's pretty shocking, folks. It's down to a trickle. The once great Victoria Falls. And again, the same thing is happening in Africa. It's being done because of flood-based farming. Again, you see here catchment areas harvesting the water from floodplains and preventing it from getting into the river systems. It's the same thing. That's what they're doing. But to get back to why the fires are so intense and what we're really facing here in Australia, have a listen to some of the things that are said in some of these reports. Listen to some of the reports from the fireys themselves.
I've been an activist now for 10 years and been in the Royal Fire Service for 18 years, so this is like a full circle happening for me now. Yeah, and we're just seeing in the Royal Fire Service, we're seeing things we haven't seen before, time and time again since 2000. So that's fire behaviour, doing things that it's not supposed to be doing. And now this year we're seeing a fire that no one thought was possible. We've always seen big fires, but not so many. We haven't seen 2.7 million hectares burnt, with 750 odd houses burnt. And it's just basically hard work that only 6 people have died, compared to other major fires that's happened beforehand. You're killing us. Stop, you're killing us. Through your inaction, through your corrupt behaviour, through your taking money from under the table, you're killing us. You're killing Australia on so many levels. I grew up in Brisbane, and I remember my family, my dad was the only one that had to go to work, and we lived okay, and we could afford to buy a house. I'm 50 now, and both parents have to go to work, and we'll never afford a house.
That's the situation that we're facing here, folks. He's right with that. But when he's saying the fires are acting in ways they haven't behaved before, ways that are unpredictable, things they haven't seen before, and this guy's been in the Royal Fire Service for quite a long time. Have a listen to what this guy says. This is a very, very interesting piece of dialogue. Have a listen to this.
This has been quite a year. We've had fires pretty much from February right through to, well, we've still got stumps burning on our property. We had some trees come down the other day. This is unbelievable. It's across the whole state. It's looking very much like California. There's people with all different theories, none of which have any evidence. It doesn't matter whether they're containing religiosity or that they are status driven or what have you, or Greta driven, how dare I. But we've got a very strange situation where the fires seem to be burning from the desert to the ocean. It's not normal in the spread of them. There's been all sorts of strange circumstances, from lightning strikes to young children in the bush. It's way too orchestrated to be that simple, I think. This is only my opinion, but we really felt quite heavily invested and stayed and fought, but the suggestion was not to do so. In fact, the fireys that had come to the bottom of my driveway told us that it was a lost cause, suicide mission, and to go away from the place and put tape around it. We went back up the mountain, fought the fire and beat it, but you know, it was a bit of a, it wasn't easy, let me say. No one's finding it easy. But I think we've lost sight of personal safety. No one even knows what the fireballs, self-actuating fireballs are. There's a lot of safety equipment that's not being adhered to. People don't really... We've lost sight of,
I'll play it for you again.
Personal safety. No one even knows what the fireballs, self-actuating fireballs are. There's a lot of safety equipment that's not being adhered to. People don't really understand how to set their house out.
Self-actuating fireballs. No one knows what the self-actuating fireballs are. That's an interesting thing for a guy to say, isn't it? A report that came out from South Australia. Bushfires in the vineyards. Bushfire devastates Adelaide Hills vineyards with around 1/3 wiped out. Vineyards, folks. Very lush green vineyards. The report down here, an intensity you can't believe. In my 35 years in the industry, I've never seen a bushfire go through vines like it has here and completely decimate them. They're normally green and lush, and they don't burn easily. They burn in less than half an hour and with an intensity that you can't believe. Bushfires running through grapevines, folks. This is unprecedented, with an intensity you can't believe. Have a listen to this report.
So I'm back on the fire ground this morning from the little issue we had about 5 o'clock this afternoon when this fire at Priggles Road flared up from 3 weeks ago. As you can see, this has got some leaf litter on it. There was no leaf litter here last night at all. It burnt totally clean. There was nothing here. What was here last night before it burnt was this fuel litter. This is the fire ground that burnt 3 weeks ago, and look at the fuel that is here already. You can probably hear me walking through it, but I'll pick some up. That there is as dry as chips. So dry. The ground here is so dry that it holds the heat. We found some hot spots last night with the thermal imaging camera that were in the ground. You could not see them, there's no smoke. But we put the camera on them and they were 500 degrees in the ground. You get this dry leaf litter land, the camera
hear
on
that,
them,
folks?
and they were 500 degrees in the ground. You get this dry leaf litter land on that, it will spontaneously combust and make a run through it, which it did yesterday. It ran up this hill, or here, it ran up and started spotting over the top. This fire will need to be patrolled for a month at this stage, I reckon. We'll keep an eye on it. If you see smoke, let us know, but yeah, we'll keep an eye on it.
Patches of ground that are still 500 degrees 3 weeks after the fire has passed. And he's suggesting it's because the ground is so dry. Is that really why it's happening, folks? Patches of ground still 500 degrees 3 weeks after the fire's been through. Self-actuating fireballs. Fires burning from the desert to the coast like nothing we've ever seen before. On the last report I showed you sparkler compounds, common sparklers, what they use to make sparklers, the composition, metallic fuel, aluminium. the oxidizer, barium nitrate, strontium nitrate, mandatory to make sparklers, sparkler dust. People gave me a lot of flack for that, saying, no, it's not possible, that's what they're doing, it's not possible they would do this. If you have a look at this, here's a report, combustible compositions for generating aerosols, particularly suitable for cloud modification and weather control and aerosolization process. Why would anyone even invent something like this? But you look at it, oxidizing agent, sulfur. You can read through this yourself, folks, but it talks about aluminium oxide, it talks about, see, aluminium. It talks about how to bond certain oxidizing agents with things such as aluminium, why aluminium is so cheap. It talks about all the problems here that you have with doing this and the description of their invention. This invention provides a solution to the above-mentioned difficulties which are encountered in preparing, dispersing and activating the substance for purposes of cloud condensation and fog clearing. People saying they're not driving the rain away. You can use this sort of stuff for fog clearing or cloud seeding. And it's metallic fibres that they're dropping, folks. Remember this, it's aluminium. But you can go and read through this yourself. This is a combustible composition, okay? Has an outer casing, which the core has an outer casing formed of aluminium. A combustible composition, which the core has an outer casing formed of resin-impregnated glass fibres. So you can do with certain things. And it goes down here, you look at the bottom of the report, it goes on and on and on. It gives you the whole explanation of it, and it tells you what the properties are down here. Results, observed and photographed. Burns with great violence. Aerosol contains unreacted sodium, chlorine, sodium. Burns with violence. Burns with violence. Burns very bright. Ammonium nitrate. Burns with great violence. Burns with violence. This is what it's all about. And here is the citations as well. Method for composition and dispelling vapors. Smoke producing mixture. Metal chloride screening smoke mixture. Smoke generator. Propellant system. Composite incendiary powder containing metal-coated oxidizing salts. This is everything I've been talking about, folks. Pyrotechnic composition providing solid oxidizer. And it goes on and on. These are other patents, okay? You can go and look at all of this. Link is below. There's actually another link below is there as well. You can find here links to 100 patents related to weather modification. Shows they can do this, folks. So the question is, why would the fires be burning so bright? And when you look at this, it's because they're using aluminium. Like I said, it's basically sparkler dust, and that's what the fireys need to know what they're dealing with. Now, there's a report that was sent to me by a guy as well, very, very small YouTube channel. He's got about 300 subscribers or something. I think he's a Kiwi guy, really trying to get the message out. And he did a little bit of a test with aluminium oxide. And I'm going to show you a little bit of his report here. He shows you a photograph at the start here of the spraying over New South Wales. Now think about it, folks, these are not contrails. And he shows you a little bit in this as well that there are reports that talk about adding aluminium to jet fuel in order for cloud seeding. That's what they're talking about. So you've got to understand as well, the people that do this, that even create these fuels, because when you look at this, you might think, well, we should find the companies that are supplying the jet fuels. That's the culprit. But they might just be told, no, you've got to put this in here because we need it for cloud seeding. See, everything's so compartmentalised that, you don't know who to blame. But have a listen to this. He gives you some pretty vital information here. Have a listen to this. I'm a little bit shaky with finding the parts through the clip, folks, so bear with me, but I'll just show you a couple of bits of it.
This is on April the 16th, 2016. What we're looking at, all in here, you can see these white lines. I've gone over and over this numerous times. It's probably one of the best images I've found, as it's only one image per day at one particular moment of the day. But what these trails are, media like to have you believe it's condensation trails. Well, I'll tell you what, it's far from condensation trails. You just got to have a look at the likes of Welshback seeding patent. here we have it. And what it says in here, stratospheric Wellsbach seeding for reduction of global warming. There's those magic words, global warming. Such materials, such materials also include Wellsbach materials and the oxides of metals, right? Oxides of metals. Now, we would go over here and it says, one technique proposed to seed the metallic particles was to add the tiny particles to the fuel of the jet airliners.
You hear that?
So that the particles would be emitted from the jet engine exhaust while the airliner was at air cruising altitude.
Right, so they're telling you right there in the patent that's one of the methods that they're planning on using to deliver this. And he shows you a little experiment here with aluminium oxide. Have a look at this.
This is going to give you a good idea of why these forests are burning so damn ferociously and so large. And this is not just locally, New Zealand, Australia, this is globally.
And remember as well, folks, that this is just basic aluminium oxide he's using here. What we're dealing with in the spraying is nanoparticulates of aluminium oxide. I mean, it's been reduced to nano form, and it's also been bonded with barium and strontium, which is essentially sparkler dust. And we know this because this is what we're finding in the soil samples and the water samples. We find elevated levels of all three elements. It's not just aluminium, it's aluminium, barium and strontium. But have a look at this little experiment he does here with this aluminium oxide.
We go with a little demonstration on what happens when aluminium oxide comes to a flame. See it liven up. You can see that flame chasing up to the container. Still burning when it's still just dropping. So next time you see these white trails, you just watch it. Spread out and spread out.
You know, you spray this stuff in the sky, it comes down in the rain, it gets evenly distributed through the rain, it soaks into everything. And this type of substance, which is a bonded substance, you've got aluminium bonded with barium and strontium. As I said, it's kind of like sparkler material, like sparkler dust, almost like a kind of thermite. And it would take a fair bit of heat and energy to ignite this. But once you ignite it, it goes off like a Roman candle. And up here, he mixes some with rainwater. And then he burns it again. Have a look at this. He's heating the rainwater off and drying it out again. So it's been soaked in rainwater.
Turn off the gas. All the water's evaporated. And the aluminium still there. So now we'll just remove them, turn it back on. So now we're back into flame. So this is what was soaked. As you can see, it's back to powder form. No dissolving in the water, and still full of life. So the only way to get rid of that, burn it.
The only way to get rid of it is to burn it. So when you look at what these guys are saying, you know, the ground's still 500 degrees 3 weeks after the fire's gone through. You know, you think about this stuff being sprayed in the sky, nanoparticulates, aluminium bonded with barium and strontium, it comes down in the rain and it soaks through everything. And then the rain, the water dries up and it's evenly spread through everything. I was talking to a girl in Ukai the other day who's been fighting fires. She's been out, I think, near Drake, somewhere out there, out near Main Arm, Wilson's Creek, somewhere like that. She's been fighting the fires. And she said that trees that are evergreen trees that are fire resistant, that don't normally burn, are burning. There's areas of grass where the grass is like 1 inch high. It's burning. You know, there's nothing there to burn. It's virtually just dry ground and it's burning. You know, I've seen photographs of the cliffs in the Blue Mountains where the cliffs are burning. You know, the whole place has been sprayed with this stuff, folks, and our governments are the one who's done it. And it's important that the fireys see this. It's important that the fireys know what they're dealing with, because they're still doing it, folks. Here's a lovely video that was sent to me by someone the other day. I'll turn the sound down on this one, but just have a look at this. This is the sun in Sydney. You know, he's just looking at the sun through the smoke. He turns the brightness up here to give you a little bit of a look like a normal day for a second, to try to get it to look. That's turning the brightness down. He turns the brightness up. You almost get a normal day. It gets a little bright. But then he looks over here and focuses over here. Well, this is while the sky is full of smoke and there's clouds just all around Sydney and it's just covered and the fires are raging. And there they are, folks. They're still spraying up in the sky. And no, it's not a contrail, ladies and gentlemen. It's weather modification. That's how they do it. And for people who think they don't use this sort of spraying for weather modification, well, I've just shown you the patents, but have a look at this as well. There's this report, how Beijing used rockets to keep the opening ceremony dry. What they did was they launched all of these things and they dispersed the clouds using what are basically chemtrails, only they did it from rockets here on the ground. That's how they did it, folks. And that's how they do it. And they also do it using, as I've said, I would suggest they do it using the Doppler radars. That may seem a very strange thing for people to consider. There was a girl that I was talking to in Virginia Beach when I did a talk there. I did a talk at a chemtrail conference in Virginia Beach with Amanda, last name escapes me, I'm sorry Amanda, at Virginia Beach, who is a chemtrail activist. And there was a woman there who had actually been tracking the Doppler radars, and she'd noticed that the Doppler radars were being used to steer the hurricanes around the United States, and she had an overwhelming amount of evidence to support the things she was saying. If she's watching this, perhaps she could contact me and I could have her onto the show to talk about it. When you look at the radars around Australia, folks, these are the radars. The black ones here are the Doppler radars. But why do we need that many weather radars around Australia when each one covers an area of about this big? Why do we need so many? Why do we need them so close together? Why do we need all these so close together? You could have this one radar would cover that whole area. So why do we need all of these weather radars everywhere, folks, if they're just reading the weather and not controlling the weather? So that's the situation that we're in here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, this drought is not going to go away with this little bit of rain that we've had. The only way we're going to heal this drought is if we release the water in Australia, get the river systems flowing again, and we do something about these criminals that are running the country in Canberra. There has been a petition that's been started to get the Governor-General to dissolve this government. I think that's a good idea. People should go and sign that petition. I'll find it and I'll put a link below. There's also Wayne Glue saying we need to get the Queen to intervene. I'm all for that as well. I mean, I don't support the Queen, I don't support the monarchy, but I will support anything that is going to reach any people regardless of their mindset. You know, there are people out there who do support the monarchy, so let's reach these people and get them to support intervention by the Queen, because that actually could stop this. But we've got to understand that, this situation that we're facing here has been contrived by the government. They've sold our resources off. They've dried the country out deliberately by blocking off the dams, building all these dams, the floodplain harvesting, all the stuff they've been doing. They're still pulling water out of the Great Artesian Basin now, still pulling water out of the aquifers, and that's why the aquifers are not flowing. Aquifers need pressure to be able to push the water up to the springs. If you're pulling water out and there's no pressure, then it's not going to push the water out of the springs and the creeks aren't going to flow. The creeks don't flow, then the trees die. You need the trees to bring the rain, so the rain fills the ground, hits the ground soaks in and gets into the aquifers. It's this cycle, it all supports itself. Once you take one part of it away, it ceases to function. And by pumping the water out of the aquifers, what they've done is they've broken the cycle. Now you're drying out the creeks, so now the trees are drying out. The dry trees will not attract rain the way lush green trees will attract rain. And everything's dying, folks. The country's turning into a desert. It's still cold here at night. I'm still using my doona. It hasn't changed. It's after Christmas now. It'll be New Year in a few days, and I'm still using a doona. When it did rain for 3 days, it was such a joy to hear the rain. But sitting here, when the noise of the rain subsided, normally where I am in the rainforest here, it would come alive after a rain. But I think I heard probably 3 frogs and maybe 4 crickets. I didn't hear, it should be thousands of frogs and thousands of crickets. I'm just not hearing them. I think I've seen 3 Christmas beetles this year, folks. There should be thousands of Christmas beetles this year, this time of year. All the peacocks in the yard, as I said last time, they've all gone. They've been here for years. They've all gone. There's a couple left, but most of them have gone. Most of the insects have gone. Even when the chickens come out of the pen, they don't scratch around anymore because there's no food in the ground for them anymore because everything's dying. All the insects are dying. The ground's drying out so much. The woman that I was speaking to in Yukai who said she'd been fighting the fire said that in the forest there are trees that the trunks are literally cracked open because the ground is so dry and the trees are so dry. That's how bad things are getting here, folks, and it's not going to stop until we rein this government system in and replace these dams, get this water back into the river system. But you can't just go and blow the dams and things like that. It's got to be done properly. It's got to be controlled release back into the river system. Just go and blow up all the dams and you'll flood the place. Property will be damaged, people will be damaged, people may even lose lives, and we'll lose all the water. It wouldn't be a sane way to do things. But we need to return the ecosystem to some form of balance. We need to understand that the situation we're facing here in Australia has been deliberately contrived. All the evidence is there. All you've got to go and do is look at all of their plans. Look what they've done to dry the country out. Look how they've prevented all the water getting into the river systems. And look how they've been spraying our country with this fire accelerant. And that's what it is, folks. It's fire accelerant. And it's extremely important that the fireys know what they're dealing with. And it's extremely important that people realise the severity of the situation we are facing here in this country. In another 2 years, we're going to be out of water if we don't pay attention. And the only way we're going to be able to heal that, as I said, is to get these river systems back in order. And that means releasing this water from these private dams and holding this government accountable. This government needs to be dismissed. The people of this country need to stop what they're doing and turn their attention to this government and remove these criminals from power before they do any more damage. It's very important, folks. We're seeing our police given machine guns and everything now. Public order response units are being created. Public order response, it sounds far less totalitarian than, Gestapo or something, I suppose. Sounds just like it's fascism light, So that's the way we're going in this country, folks. Why we need public order response units all of a sudden with machine guns? What, are they expecting some public disorder, are they? Are they expecting a few people to be complaining about not having any water and dying of thirst, are they? Is that what this is all about? We need to pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, and it's important that people get some facts on what's going on here and realise what is causing the severity of these fires and what we need to do to combat them. And, we're not getting any help from the government. It's no good even asking the government for help. They're the ones who've created this situation. They've done it deliberately. Some of the water deals that have been done by people like Barnaby Joyce, absolutely disgusting, folks. And the people of this country have got to stand up and say enough is enough. now's the time to do it. But that's about all I've got to say for today. It's taken me a little while to do this report. I wanted to bring you this report like 4 or 5 days ago, but it literally takes me this long to sit here and hype myself up to sitting in front of a camera. I just don't like cameras. I just don't like cameras. It's very difficult. I stumble, I fumble, I get things wrong. That's why I make mistakes, because there's a camera on. I just feel weird sitting here in front of a camera. It messes with my train of thought. I don't know, there's something about them. But anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks to all the people who send me so many kind emails. I do appreciate your emails, and thanks for the wealth of information people have been sending me on this as well. Thank you to the people who support me on Patreon. I couldn't do any of this if it wasn't for my Patreon supporters. You're the only ones that give me the space to have the time to be able to do this type of research. So thank you for letting me do that. I'll bring you another report as soon as possible. I hope you all had a great Christmas, and I hope you all have a great New Year. But let's not drop the ball on this, and let's, sober up and realize the severity of the situation we're facing and the necessity for us to do something about it ourselves. We've got to replace this system with something valid, replace the people in Canberra now with some people who have some integrity. And it's not these guys, I'll tell you right now, they're all in abusive office, a lot of them, just for bringing this situation about, just for allowing all this aerial spraying and denying it for so long, and the media and everything. I mean, there's so many people who are complicit in this, but we need to get the information out to people and continue spreading it as much as we can. And just the fact that they put out that news report the other day saying what a ridiculous conspiracy theory this is, while then showing you the conspiracy theory themselves, actually showing you what Agenda 21 was. And if you look at this, actually, it's an interesting thing, because it says down here that some of the main proponents, they're quite concerned about it, some of the main proponents of it are senators talking about it as well. And they're concerned that it's not just 4chan and 2chan and these conspiracy sites, it's sites like Facebook that are pushing it. But they're also saying here, they're talking about, again, they're concentrating on things such as directed energy weapons. One tweet on deliberate directed energy attacks drew nearly 80 interactions. They're not talking about sparkler dust in the chemtrails. They're not talking about aluminium monoxide. They're not talking about ground staying hot for, at 500 degrees 3 weeks after the fire's gone through. They're not talking about any of the real stuff. They're talking about all the stuff that they want you to look at and want you to focus on, because it's all a little bit out there in left field for Joe Public. So, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, folks, we've got to be careful that we stick to things that we can actually prove. And what we can prove is that they've been spraying this country with accelerant, and these fires are not normal, and that's the information we should be sharing. And also that they've been harvesting water and keeping the water from the people and creating this drought by design. That is also information that we should be sharing. Thanks for listening, folks. In Lakesh.